Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, February 18th here, Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. And today, it is just Borg and it's just Betz.
Just the two of us, Kyle. The way this show was meant to be, if we're being honest. I mean, the listeners know it. We know it. Our team knows it. Just don't tell corporate, okay, guys? Just keep it on the down low. I'm excited, man. I missed you guys last week. You got to talk running backs. You guys got to drag Nick Singleton, Katron Allen through the mud without me, so I appreciate that.
Fat man.
Fat. I can't believe they didn't know that, man. Come on. It's they're kind of old. They're not really with the nicknames these days. But great show last week. Listen back to it. I missed you guys, and I'm excited to jump in today talking quarterbacks and a kind of fun, like sneaky fun tight end class.
I'm actually more excited about the tight ends than the quarterback. I just need to say that at the top. As somebody who every single year I think we've done this quarterback episode together, and it has been an area over the years, I've kind of grown in what I've gotten to get into with the fantasy football world, the fantasy football space, but my early days, and we're talking like early, over a decade ago, it was me charting film and charting where quarterbacks, where they were throwing, outside the pocket, inside the pocket, offensive line stuff. So that's kind of like, that's the real, grind the tape things that you want to hear.
Is that going back to at PFF Kyle days?
Whoa. Don't throw that out there, bud.
I mean, dude, you and the new offensive coordinator for the Dolphins, coworkers, best friends, colleagues, if you will.
Yeah, Zach Robinson now with the Buccaneers, also a former. Yeah, so we dude, obviously were super close.
You're in the PFF tree. You're the next call up to the big leagues. Kyle,
I definitely
get Kyle on the headset, man. That offense will be humming. Oh my goodness.
The quarterbacks that we have in this year's class just went down another with Trinidad Chambliss of Ole Miss going back to school, which would have been an interesting debate because internally we've had some discussions about where does he belong. I know Andy really likes him. I know that myself on the other end of the spectrum said, this is not my guy. This is a weird career arc. This guy wasn't even a starter for Ole Miss. So I think one of the things I like about these episodes, and hopefully if you're a listener, you can join in with us as we're having these dialogues. You can press pause and say, Kyle, you're an idiot. Or you could say, Betz, that was factually incorrect. Like you could correct him at the Fantasy PT on Twitter. But I think we get to tell a story of these players of what they did in college, their production profile, what translates to fantasy. And then there's another variable, which is which team do you land on? Do you land on the Jets? Do you land on the Raiders? Do you land on one of these teams that historically have had so much turnover? Now, those teams have different coaching staffs, so we can't just hold them to what they've done before. I mean, Aaron Glenn fired everybody and their mama pretty much. And
because it was their fault. Not his.
What you got to do. You got to get out the bad weeds. You got to pull up those weeds. You got to tell everybody, like, okay, this is the problem. So if you are a Jets fan or Raiders fan, there is some hope, and you're going to have some early draft choices that should be interesting. But I just want to make sure that we talk about that. Like, we don't know the landing spot. We're kind of guessing about draft capital for a lot of these players. But I was thinking about Dalton Kincaid because we're talking about tight ends today. In college, he possessed a really good production profile. A little bit older as a prospect at Utah. Commanded targets, his yards per out run. We saw it this past season in a limited amount of routes with the Bills. Like yards per out run through the roof. The only thing he's not getting in the NFL is volume, except in college you would have said this dude could command volume in the right situation. He's just not with the right team.
He was basically that team at Utah's wide receiver 1 when he came out. So the production was there. But like you said, it's a scheme fit type thing with tight ends, I think. And there's a lot of guys in this class, I think, that are going to be pretty, scheme dependent on where they land. A lot of these kind of move type tight ends, guys that don't profile as like true every down, can block, can play 85% of the snaps, and also run routes and be a top target type guys. You kind of have your niche role players in this class is kind of how it feels to me. So I do think that point on landing spot is going to matter a ton, and the fit in the offense. And really, what we're talking about fantasy for these guys, right? Like, especially at tight end. With the landscape the way it is now in Dynasty, where it's like, okay, you got Bowers, you got McBride, you got kind of the big three from last year. You still have some of the veterans that are sticking around. Sam Laporta is still young. Like, it's going to take a lot, like a special tight end talent to break into this top 10 group moving forward. So what I'm trying to do on today's show and over the next couple months is see if we can find some like diamonds in the rough that are like, the tight end 2 on your dynasty squad that in an injury, a bye week, you can kind of fill in that maybe takes a few years to develop because there's some kind of interesting profiles in this class. But I do agree with you on the scheme fit, playing style, playing time aspect of this tight end group. It's definitely interesting kind of how it's changed over the years at tight end in the NFL as well.
If you want to get all of our production profiles or rookie rankings, Andy, Mike, and Jason just finished those. Those are found in the Dynasty Pass, which is part of the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus. So I try to explain to people, they ask me all the time, hey, what do you do during the offseason? The NFL season's over. For us, I feel like we get into the most creative and the fun part of the offseason where we kind of get to build this process of here's where the prospects are at now. We're going through our film evaluations. We're talking about them and their draft capital, the combine, all of these things. And I was talking to someone at my son's baseball practice the other day, and he's like, that's so cool. So like for February, you guys get to talk prospects. And I go, yeah, in March, in April, May. Like this podcast, we get to talk about it the whole offseason, but it kind of builds, and that's what the Dynasty Pass does. So we just had our first release on Super Bowl Sunday. We will have another release coming up in about a month after the combine. We get to update some of the metrics, and then we'll have another one after the NFL draft. So,
dude,
Ultimate Draft, a month?
What are you talking about, a month? The combine's in like a week and a half, dude.
No, it's not.
It's end of February, first week of March.
Oh, I guess I'm looking at March being the next month, my friend.
Yeah, well, it's technically going to be in March and when it will be updated, but it'll be less than 30 days. So yeah, very very soon, an update coming to the Dynasty Pass. And I cut you off before the good folks could learn where the URL is. DynastyPass.com, UltimateDraftKit.com, whatever other URL you want to throw in there, Kyle. They're all good.
I haven't quite figured out with our company what the plan of attack is when it comes to just getting domain names. Have you I know that this is kind of a side conversation, but they basically cornered the market on so many different things, like ChristmasFootball.com, TuesdayFootball.com, all these random ones that we have over the years, DynastyPass.com. Pretty much, if you Google it, it'll show up at the top. And I've had friends that are in the industry, they have other websites, like, you guys are the worst, because any SEO thing, Andy figured out a long time ago how to get the footballers at the top. So whateveryouwant.com, we don't have that one, but that's pretty much what'll show up, right?
I would just say go to groinindex.com.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll land on the site.
That's, if you want prospects, go to groinindex.com. All right, let's jump in.
Quarterbacks.
All right, the first quarterback we're going to talk about is somebody that you've heard about, hopefully nonstop over the last couple of months, Fernando Mendoza of Indiana. We'll tell his story. It's very easy for us to peg him with the Raiders, although Clint Kubiak just said, hey, I haven't got to watch a lot of film. We were, busy winning a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. So no, I actually love that. I love that his answer was like, dude, I haven't watched a lot of college film. I didn't know I was going to be the Raiders coach. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was fully invested. So there is still part of the process that we still have to uncover. But redshirt junior, 6'5", 225, he will be the number one quarterback on everybody's boards because he will likely be the only quarterback selected in the first round. Maybe Ty Simpson. We'll talk about it. But the story that I want to start with before we get into the film and everything else is just that his story, his trajectory of being a lightly recruited player who's the 140th ranked quarterback coming out in his class a couple years ago. He initially committed to Yale, and then California's quarterback coach at the time was Bill Musgrave, who is now the quarterback coach of the Jets, was the one that convinced him and said, hey, I think I can turn you into a legit quarterback. And the same thing happened with Kirk Cignetti. He said, hey, I think I can turn you into a quarterback. It also helped that his brother Alberto was on the Indiana roster. That's why he ended up transferring from Cal to Indiana. But story-wise, this is made for TV stuff. There will be a movie made on Fernando Mendoza, copyrights right here.
Obviously. Yeah, he's fun, man. He's really fun, just like the person. And if you can find him online. There's videos from him, just first days at Cal. And he's a dorky young guy that doesn't look like a potential NFL starting quarterback, but to his credit, put in a ton of work. And like you said, almost went to Yale. Tells you a lot about where he's at from what's going on in between the ears, above the shoulders. And when you watch him play and you listen to him talk, yes, he's a little goofy and his interviews are funny and stuff like that. But he is a very smart player. And not to be like, big media talking guy, but like, you got to know what you're doing when you drop back with the football. It can't all be traits all the time. And that's why people get in trouble sometimes with chasing traits at quarterback and inexperience, like the years of like, yeah, we don't know about Trey Lance, but what if? And it's like Anthony Richardson. Like, yeah, he didn't really start that many games, but what if? It's like this guy has started a bunch of games. He has clearly shown that he understands how to play the position. I think can read defenses really well. He's very, very smart. By all accounts, is a really good dude, very hard worker. So like all the stuff that like you kind of worry about with quarterbacks, like he at least checks those boxes. Does that mean he will turn into a perennial top 5, top 6 fantasy quarterback? No, not necessarily. But when you're thinking about number 1 overall quarterbacks, historically in Dynasty, usually they go to spots where the depth chart is very barren. You're questioning how long does this coaching staff stick around. There's turnover year over year with those types of situations. I do feel like Fernando Mendoza is kind of built to withstand that in his first year or two in the league and then kind of develop and go from there. And from an arm talent standpoint, like, no, it's not the best we've ever seen, but he can make all of the throws. And I really do feel like there's something with him where it almost felt like, when guys are kind of late bloomers and they're not really highly touted and you don't know their name for like 4 years in a row, aren't you like waiting for the shoe to drop where you're like, all right, okay, that was a fun story. It was great in college football. It didn't really work. I was kind of waiting for that this year. Eventually, it's like, are they going to keep getting away with this? And every time he was put to the test, especially in huge moments, 3rd and long type situations, he answered. So I think he's got it. I think he's going to stick around the league for a while. And so when you're thinking about like floor for your rookie picks in Dynasty, especially in a Superflex league, I feel pretty good about Fernando Mendoza. It doesn't mean he will be, like I said, a perennial top 5 scorer at the position, but I do feel pretty good about his ability to translate to the NFL.
I think we all felt that if you watched college football this past season with Indiana. You kept waiting for there to be a moment towards the end of the season where it's like, okay, well, they're going to blow the Big Ten, or
Right.
what somewhere at the very, very end. And then just talking in terms of college football playoff, it felt like a weaker field than we've had in the past. And so even their run, I think people are even questioning like some of that, like, these teams weren't as good. Miami was fortunate to get there. Regardless of all of that, when we're projecting for the NFL, size, so it's 6'5", 225, and just the way that he throws, it's more of a 3/4 arms length. It's like it's rifled there. So I love that he has enough velocity on his throws. I will not say that he has elite arm strength. It's solid. It's good enough. But with the velocity, you can kind of get there on some of those throws, outside the numbers, intermediate area stuff. I feel like he was also really, really good on back shoulder throws, which that always comes with timing. It comes with your OC. It comes with who your wide receiver is. And for being a player that transferred in, it seemed like he had the rapport there with Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt, former JMU great.
Right. Go Dukes.
Betz went to JMU, in case you didn't know, where Signetti went. So I think we're not going to really question this much. I will bring up that he was mostly in shotgun. He had only 2 snaps under center this past year. So the scheme and whatever he's going to run, he's probably going to do a lot more under center, which is what we saw Sam Darnold do. And I do think that what he's really, really good at is looking at the defense. His best trait, you mentioned it, is just reading and processing, and then calling an audible, shifting the play, and then making sure that when you are in play action, that it looks the exact same as if you're handing off the ball. Like that's what Sam Darnold, I felt like, excelled at this past year. And obviously he's not the exact same player, but there's not a lot of negatives about him as a passer. I do have some negatives about him taking sacks that hopefully will grow over time, but those are my main concerns.
Yeah, I know you put this in our doc here, just his pressure to sack ratio in the college football playoff like really skyrocketed. And you're playing the best team, so it kind of makes sense, but almost 30%. I mean, that is not good, especially in college. So that's one area you can poke a hole in his overall kind of profile. What he did last season at Indiana was the pressure to sack ratio. Sometimes that does worry me, but then you ask yourself again, like, when he gets to the NFL level, is he put in a position to be able to succeed? That's the one area where I am a little worried about this Raiders offensive line, which was abysmal last year. They had injuries and stuff like that, but I do think there's one thing that we should consider. Again, not every prospect is perfect. Mendoza is not, and that is one area that is a weakness. How do you feel like he fits in the Clint Kubiak? Because obviously anything wild can happen over the next 2 or 3 months, but we're all assuming he's a Raider. How do you feel like he fits in that system?
So one of the things, if you go back and watch, a lot of tape, right? You get to see a ton of games, college football playoffs, is that there wasn't as much play action passing, and part of that is just being in shotgun. He's not under center. He had the biggest differential in terms of yards per attempt between play action and non-play action of any quarterback in college football. So he was actually down 2 yards per pass attempt when he did use play action passing. And the reason I bring that up is that's been the staple of the Cougs system. It's what was so good, what made the Seahawks look so good, is that every single play, you're like, they want to run the ball, and yet we talked about this all the time on the DFS podcast. It's like they were able to get in these advantageous situations with multiple tight ends on the field and then play action, and then JSN's open every single time. So I do worry a little bit about that and the experience. Players can learn that. He's obviously very teachable. He's just not going to run the way that we want. Like if we're breaking this down from film to fantasy, it's like a 7% scramble rate is fine. It is not great when we're projecting at the next level. An 8% college rush yard share is not going to translate to fantasy. That's like 100 to 150 yards a season, not 400 yards, which makes a difference. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to take some lumps, but he has a longer leash over the next 3 years, I would say, to say, like, I'm a franchise quarterback.
For sure. I think that's a good point. I did think, just to kind of speak to the rushing, there are moments where like you can see it working when he runs, like as a RPO type situation or as a zone read, but he didn't do it a lot. And so, yeah, historically that has not been a good bet in fantasy, which is kind of why I mentioned, like, I don't see him ever really developing into a perennial top 5, top 6 type of guy for fantasy. But again, I think we both agree, like, the take home here is he may take lumps in the first year or two with the Raiders, but I do feel pretty good. Like in Superflex leagues, he's clearly the top quarterback in the class. There's not really even a discussion. Like, I think the biggest inflection point in rookie drafts, Jeremiah Love is very likely to go number 1 any format you have. And then I could see some people preferring one of the wide receivers, and I could see some people preferring Mendoza, which I'm cool with. Like, there's sometimes where a quarterback gets pushed up and I'm like, I don't know. I do think he has long-term starter potential in the league. And so that's what I was saying before. I think the floor from a dynasty rookie outlook here perspective is pretty high on Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, not to make the same player comp, they're different players, but like think about Jared Goff's career arc, and like that first year was abysmal.
Yeah.
Being taken number 1 overall. Next year with McVay, he ascends, he becomes, a Super Bowl quarterback, and then with the Lions, he has this long career, and he's been a top 10 quarterback each of the last 3 years. So there is an arc for players like that. Mendoza's probably going to run way more than Goff, but I think right now I feel comfortable with Mendoza in a super flex, like at 104, 105, where I think I just like a couple of the wide receivers a little bit more, and that's just how we usually play. But I wouldn't fault anybody of taking him at 102, 103 if you need quarterbacks. But if you don't need quarterbacks, like I don't mind riding dirty if I just have 2 starters and Mendoza's more of a luxury.
Get yourself some Malik Willis there to fill the gap. My man's going to run.
Okay, I
He's
got to
gonna
ask you a
start
question.
this year. I'm telling
Dude,
you.
you have transformed from, we clearly did not like Malik Willis on this podcast years ago. It was like, and we took bets against him going number 2 overall. We were like, that's hilarious. That's not happening. And now you're just all of a sudden this Malik Willis truther. Seriously.
I just think he's going to start this year. And like, I don't know if anybody out there is doing
He's a Jet is what I'm hearing.
Maybe. Or a Dolphin. Or a Viking. I mean, come on. I just think there's a mismatch right now where he's at from a trade target standpoint in Dynasty, and anybody doing like early sicko best ball stuff, like he goes so late, and it's like, I don't know, man, if he's starting 12 games this year, he will run, and therefore fantasy production. So he's just one of my like favorite cheap guys to get. So what a fun time to be alive.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about these other quarterbacks. All right, the next quarterback we're going to talk about is Ty Simpson out of Alabama. He is from Martin, Tennessee, which is actually a pretty important point because his dad, Jason Simpson, is the head coach at UT Martin, which makes him a Western Tennessee boy. I know, Betz, you don't know the geography that well, but you just hop on I-40 West.
Dude,
you go up 45 East. Come on.
I did a rotation in PT school in Johnson City, Tennessee. So I was on the east side. But
East
I
Tennessee
traveled
State
west
Buccaneers.
a time or two. That's right.
Okay. I'm glad we're throwing this out there. So you can talk about the football background, pedigree, all that stuff. His dad coaches. His dad was the one that came out recently and said, like, everyone I've talked to, my son's got a first-round grades. And then Everyone else
Of
like,
course he does.
I don't know about that. But coming out of high school, he was the number 4 quarterback in the class behind greats such as Penn State's Drew Aller and Clemson's Kate Klubnik. So coming out of high school, he was a big deal. And when you get thrown into Alabama, I'll just say this as somebody whose family watches a lot of Alabama football, you've had a lot of good quarterbacks and a lot of success over the last really 15 years. And he kind of waited his turn, which really isn't normal in this day and age of NIL money. It's like you come in as a high recruit, you don't play right away, you usually end up transferring, get some money elsewhere to be the starter, but he waited 3 years to be the starter. And this past year in 2025, he started 15 games, threw for over 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns. But there was a slow decline over the course of the season. If you watch Ty Simpson film, if you watch Alabama games, you're like, is this team that good? Now, when you watch Alabama football, you also compare them to all the other great teams. And so you start sniffing around watching these games like, I feel like this team isn't as good as they're given credit. And they were kind of exposed later on in college football playoff against Indiana. So where do you want to start with Ty Simpson?
I mean, we just got to address the biggest red flag in his entire profile is the fact that he has minimal experience. And that has been a major issue in recent seasons with quarterbacks coming out. We don't know if he's going to go first round or second, but just air quotes, highly drafted guys that have minimal experience. The hit rate has been pretty much horrendous for these types of guys. So college experience matters at quarterback. That said, it's a weak quarterback class, and so I could see him getting pushed up into the first round as a result. Now, that is a yellow warning sign to everybody playing fantasy. It does not necessarily mean he is usually worthy of a first-round pick. Like sometimes these guys will go there because of supply and demand issues, and when you're looking at the quarterbacks that are taking the field in week 13 in the NFL, like it's like, this is horrendous. Like we got to get more quarterbacks in the league that can do this. So I could see a team taking a shot on Ty Simpson earlier than he necessarily deserves to go because of supply and demand issues. I fear that that will inflate his value arbitrarily in the Superflex world. I don't know what to think of Ty Simpson, if I'm being honest, because like you said, if you watch the first, let's say like 7 weeks, I mean, this dude looked like a first round quarterback. If you watch the last month and a half, it was like, this guy looks lost back there. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of what's happening with the offense and why necessarily that happened. I know the run game was like wildly inefficient, which is not the normal for Alabama. So they kind of became one-dimensional, and we know that that has issues and trickle-down effects on quarterback play down the road. He also looked way more skittish in the pocket in the back half, took way more sacks. In the first half of the year was like a magician in the pocket, could navigate pressure, throw on the run, all of those things, keep his eyes downfield, and looked great doing it. So I think there's a wide range of outcomes where like Simpson gets a starting job, he sticks around the league for a handful of years, and you're like, okay, he's a quarterback 16 in fantasy, a quarterback 2, like cool. I also think there's a possibility where he gets a handful of starts because of his inexperience goes poorly, and then all of a sudden he's out of the league and not even on a second contract. So one of those guys that I'm fine taking a shot on in Superflex League. I would not take him anywhere close to like the top 8, 9, 10 picks personally. He's more of like a fringe first rounder in Superflex if you just need quarterback. But really for me, probably lower on my board than other people.
Yeah, the best parts of Simpson is that he can dice up zone coverage. His 86% adjusted completion percentage on play action was the best in the class. So you brought it up. When the run game was working early in the season, guess what? The passing game worked really well for him, and he worked really well inside the pocket. He does have some plays, so he tied Diego Pavia for the most big-time throws of anybody in this class. So the best parts of him, you go, oh, wow, this is a first-rounder. And that's why he was kind of mocked there for most of the season. And yet you've seen this kind of steady decline over the last month or so, where it's like, is this guy really a first-round pick? His dad says so. And then it's kind of like, okay, he's going to end up on day 2. And historically, if you're a quarterback that ends up on day 2, you just have such a short leash. The team can move on. The names that we brought up last year, it was Tyler Shuck was in that discussion of like, if you're drafted on day 2, it could work, but it's him, Jalen Hurts, Jimmy Garoppolo. It's a pretty low list. And then you have guys like Dak, who like was, on day 3. So it's a rare thing for somebody to be drafted and to make an impact for fantasy. He actually is a better runner than you would think. Like, it's not like a huge part of his game, but like definitely a little bit more of a scrambler than you would think for somebody who profiles as a pocket passer. I will also add that Alabama's wide receivers had a ton of drops. It was the worst in this class if you're looking at the pure number of drops from their wide receivers. Not the impact group this year. I know people bring up Ryan Williams, who was supposed to be the dude at Alabama, and it was actually a very down year for him compared to the one before. So I think Simpson overall for fantasy is just stuck in the spot of like, well, if you're going to end up on day 2 and not run and be a backup, who cares?
Jeez,
Sorry.
Kyle. Give him a chance. I will say, just to kind of put, like you said, the positive on him was
yes,
the ability against zone coverage, which does have some translated ability to the NFL today. A lot of teams are playing zone defense, take away the deep play. Can you hit 10 to 19 yards on a down in and down out basis and then deliver some splash plays? Between the numbers this year, this is per PFF, he completed 74% of his passes for 8.8 YPA with a 12-2 touchdown interception ratio. That's pretty good. That's actually really good. So I just want to say, like, I think the tools could be there for it to work, but like you said, it kind of feels like a thin needle to thread, so to speak, on Simpson's fantasy outlook. So we'll see, but yeah, most likely kind of a fringe first-round pick in the NFL draft.
If you were asking me right now, I would say he ends up outside the first round.
I agree with that, because I think the most likely situation is somebody might have to trade back into the first to make it happen, and those are always really tough to predict. So I would also agree, more likely round 2 than round 1.
All right, let's profile the only other quarterback that's currently projected in the top 100, and that's Garrett Nussmeier of LSU. 6'1", 205, definitely shorter than you think watching his film. You're like, oh, he is the son of current Saints OC Doug Nussmeier, as you and I know him, Dougie Fresh.
Of course.
Doug Nussmeier with Kellen Moore there. It is interesting when you look at Nussmeier. He was a 4-star recruit, and I found this out. He moved 12 times growing up. And that is the life of being the son of somebody who works in college football and the NFL. It's like, I don't think we realize like how much turnover there is in coaching staffs, but then the trickle-down effect of everybody else in their life. So poor Garrett just, made some friends, had to leave them. Made some friends, or maybe he didn't make any friends. I don't know. I didn't see who went to his birthday party.
You didn't have that in your scouting report, Kyle? Come on.
No, definitely not. But his arm looks like he would be 6'3" or 6'4", but he's kind of undersized and he's a little bit older as a prospect and doesn't run. So I just have to first start off by saying there's already a lot stacked up against him if he's going to end up going round 3, round 4. There's tons of stuff in his profile. You're like, it's hard for me to say there's going to be a ton of success.
For sure, yeah. He's more of just a dynasty dart throw. Maybe he gets a couple starts at the end of the season on a team that wants to get a look at him, and maybe he hits. It's like he really is just a dart throw. I will say he did play through injury this past year, and so if you look at his games played, his production, his efficiency, all that stuff fell off massively from 2024. 2025 it was an oblique injury, and he also dealt with a knee injury this past year. So watching him this past year, I was like, the ball placement is kind of all over the map. Maybe that was injury related. I'm not really sure, but the take home is he's not necessarily anything that you can bank on for fantasy. And honestly, you shouldn't bank on for fantasy. It's more just you need to know the name because he will be a top 100 pick and could get some starts at this end of the year as a sleeper type guy that you just see what happens. But yeah, from a fantasy production standpoint, just a 2% scramble rate, that's not what we're looking for. So I think we can keep this one pretty quick.
Yeah, and I'll just add my last note. Sometimes where the ball is going feels very, very obvious. And just in terms of first read, here's where it's going. And then there are plays in the intermediate area where you're like, oh, you can hit this, 15-yard in. And this play looks really good, and it's LSU. And you can think of everything that's been good with LSU quarterback play, and then you have these turnovers. So Dan Brugler brought up Mason Rudolph as a comp, and I don't know if that's mean to bring that up or if it's nice, but he's been in the league. He was third-round pick.
Stick around the league for 7 or 8 years as a backup. Seems like a pretty good life to me.
Dude, that would be great. There's really no other names to know. Carson Beck of Miami could sneak in the top 100. Sawyer Robertson of Baylor. Drew Aller. Pause. Okay. And then the name that we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast for fantasy purposes is Taylon Green of Arkansas, because he is a true unicorn at 6'6", and he's able to run. So stash him, put him on your taxi squad. He'll look really, really cool there. That's the best part of a taxi squad anyways.
Oh, it is. I mean, stash the guys you like, and just if they hit for one game randomly, you're like, see? But in all seriousness, like if he does get a start or two at the end of this year for a bad team that they just want to see what can he do, like he's a guy that I could see putting up like top 15 fantasy numbers just because of the rushing ability. Outside of that, there's not much else to say.
And if you're one of those people, you're like, why did you not go into detail of all these players? The Dynasty Pass will have write-ups in all of these, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm just going to say it right here.
Oh, Kyle.
We have we're adding something this year. I did the stupid thing of figuring out how to add stuff to the Dynasty Pass without charging more, like an idiot. And we have scattering reports on all players listed here, all the quarterbacks. You'll have all the write-ups, what scheme fit, what they're good at, what they're bad at, some of our notes. You'll even get to see Andy, Mike, and Jason's, which players they love the most of this class. And so that'll all be in the Dynasty Pass, in the app, all that good stuff. So that will be coming out the next release for the Combine release. So if we didn't give you all of the, Drew Aller love that he deserves from Penn State, then maybe you could write it up there in a scattering report, Betz.
I'll pass.
All right, moving on.
Tight ends.
All right, so this class I think is fun. Last year's class with Loveland, Warren, Fannin had the wild, insane production that we kind of had to adjust when we were comparing them to previous classes. And then with the emergence of rookie tight ends recently, Laporta, Bowers, in last year's class, I think the thinking is, wow, it's only going to stay like this forever. And so as we're moving through these tight end prospects, I do want to ask some contextual questions, like when we get to Kenyon Sadiq first. Is some of that going to rub off in Dynasty? Like, is some of that already being inflated into his value of what these other guys did? And the phrase I always use, which makes me sound smarter than I really am, is that what Brock Bowers did as a rookie is orthogonal to what Kenyon Sadiq, meaning it doesn't actually affect him like what he does in the field. It might affect schemes a little bit, might affect play calling, but Brock Bowers' production from 2 years ago will not correlate with what Kenyon Sadiq as a rookie does as a rookie. Does that make sense? And do I sound smart?
I mean, what a word. That was just next level, Kyle. That was great. It makes sense, right? Like the last couple years we've been spoiled by these rookie tight ends. Like when Bowers came out, you knew the name for like 3 years in a row. It's like, I can't wait for this guy to come in the NFL because when he does, he will be an animal. And guess what? He is. When Warren and Loveland came out last year, we were all like, these guys are awesome, awesome picks. They're going to go in the top 15 of the NFL draft. Everything about their efficiency is off the charts. These guys are legit. Even Harold Phantom, we were like, I don't know, you average 3.5 yards per route run. Like, he might be pretty good. He's pretty good, right? Like, there was a lot that you could point to say this is why this is working in recent years. This year's class, while there are fun players, and I'm excited to talk about them, there's nobody even on the same remote level as those guys. So even though Kenyon Sadiq is going to be a first-round NFL pick, and it's kind of been labeled as like it's Sadiq's class and there's a bunch of other guys, I do not think that we should artificially elevate Sadiq's value relative to other tight ends in Dynasty or other picks in this year's rookie class across positions because, and we'll talk about him here in a second, you can poke a lot of holes in his profile too. So there's nobody even close to what we've seen in recent seasons. So yes, I would not be surprised if we look back at the end of this year and we're like, oh, you remember that amazing run of rookie tight ends that we had over the last 2-3 years? It kind of took a break for a year. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
Yeah, and with the tight end position, there's still information that we're going to gather after the combine. Usually we throw out a lot of stuff. I wrote an article a couple years ago about what we should pay attention to at the combine. I looked at all the research of all these different places, combined it, and found the tight end position is kind of the one we care about the most because it translates. If you're an athletic freak, we want to see that at the next level. We want to see the yak ability, that you can actually break tackles, that you're, can do all these other things. There's also, with tight ends, a couple of different terms that we use sometimes. We talk about guys that are flex tight ends, that are like the Mike Gesicki, Kyle Pitts guys of the world. It's like, you're not really a tight end, you're not really a wide receiver, you're kind of out there. There's the hybrid move tight ends. So we think about Bowers. Kittle's a great example of this, of like, you can literally do everything. Sometimes they're called H-backs. That's like the Harold Fannin of the world. We have a couple in this class that I think fit that. And then there are the other ones where it's like Trey McBride, you're just a monster. You're just everything at all times and you're really, really good. Those are rare players. And then the inline pass and run blocking bros. Those are the Drew Samples of the world, the Drew Stool Samples.
Poor Drew, man. Catching
second round pick, man.
Catching strays on February 18th on a random Dynasty podcast. He's just trying to do his job, man. Come on.
Dude, I also did this study, and I can't remember if I ever published it, but I looked at all the tight end draft selections over the last decade. And it was more of like, okay, so why were you drafted here? You know, what was your skill set? How did it translate to your athleticism? And some players are literally just drafted for their blocking in the second or third round. So like the Cardinals drafted another tight end a couple years ago named Tip Ryman that you're like, oh, this is a third round pick. He must be valuable. Dude is just a blocker and a blocker only. And that's all he's going to be. And then you look at first round draft picks like Hayden Hurst and you go, what the heck were the Ravens doing? They drafted another tight end that year who happened to be Mark Andrews. So there's a variety of reasons of why you draft a tight end.
I think that's a really important point to bring up, actually, not to just poke fun at those names, but just NFL teams sometimes, like you said, have a vision for how they're going to use this player that means nothing for fantasy. And so this is the one position, you know, we know draft capital matters perhaps more than anything in this whole process of what we do at running back, wide receiver, and of course, quarterback. At tight end, yes, it's nice to get drafted early, but this is why you see some kind of sleepers on day 2, some day 3 guys that emerge over the, several years during the NFL, is that the NFL draft capital is not so directly tied to how it translates for fantasy because, like you said, there are guys that get drafted in certain areas of the draft because they have a lot of value to an NFL team as a run blocker. Of course, we don't care about that, but that's what I'm trying to get at is I would not put so much weight into NFL draft capital at tight end the way that we do at wide receiver and running back.
Yeah, and Dane Brugler put out this tweet recently that I think gives evidence of because the NFL values tight ends for a variety of reasons. You just saw a team that won the Super Bowl using a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, but there were 27 tight ends invited to the combine this year. The previous 4 years, the average was about 19. So I think the NFL is thirsty for tight ends, but maybe not thirsty for fantasy tight ends, although we've had very, very good ones recently. We're going to start off talking about Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, and I have to confess, I don't know if you know this about me, Betz. I am a sucker for any and all things Oregon. Some people hate the uniforms. They hate all that stuff with it. I have always loved Oregon since I was a kid. Loved some Joey Harrington back in the day, my 2003 NCAA football, my PS2.
Oh my goodness, dude. What a game. That was the absolute best.
Dude, that one was a game changer for me. 2002 with Chris Winkie also meant a lot to me. But so I really like Oregon, and anytime I see players do cool stuff in Oregon uniforms, Justin Herbert, whoever, I really, really like them. Sadiq is interesting because he's listed as 6'3", 245. I don't think he's that tall. And I think he's going to come in around 235, 240. So a little bit smaller than how he's listed. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Beautiful. And love it there.
You been there?
Never been.
Neither have I. But Oregon, it's funny. Oregon kind of swooped in at the last minute because all of a sudden NIL money a couple years ago was a thing. And he had offers to play wide receiver, to play edge rusher, which is interesting because if you think about him as an athlete, it's that makes sense. He can do anything on the field. They line him up in the backfield. They line him up in the slot. They line him up out wide. He can do anything. And he played behind Terrence Ferguson and Justin Herbert's little brother the first 2 years at Oregon. And then this past year, 51 receptions, 560 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. It was a really, really good season with some really, really awesome moments. So where do you want to start?
I mean, just the fact that he was recruited as a wide receiver and or edge rusher, and then you watch him play, you're like, this dude is an absolute freak. So fast forward 3 or 4 weeks when we do this release of the post-combine risers, I almost feel like it's a guarantee Sadiq will be on that list. He was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, which if you're not familiar with him, puts together kind of the most athletic players in the country, and how they're going to surprise and what they do in the gym and their, broad jump and all that sort of stuff. Sadiq is going to test out of this world, I feel like, at the combine. And we want that for fantasy, right? We want guys that at tight end have an insane speed score, can jump out of the gym, can do all these things because yards after the catch is so important at the position, and ability to break tackles and do all these things that make you a difference maker for fantasy are so important. So it does matter. And I do think that is a huge thing to watch for at Indy when they do the combine is Sadiq. That said, when I look at his overall production profile, it's kind of lacking. Like for a guy that's pegged as like, this is your class, you're the tight end one, there's no questions about that. You're the only guy going in the first round. You would think normally you'd see more efficiency from like yards per route run, targets per route run standpoint, from a dominating standpoint. And I would say that they're not bad, but they're not great either. So that's my one question is like, is he more of an athlete and an overall very gifted athlete, or is he like a true tight end, or is he a guy that like might just take time to develop because he is so young, which is good. We want that in Dynasty, and take some time to really like learn the NFL ropes. I wouldn't be surprised by that. I will say just from a usage standpoint, in 2024, his yards after the catch was off the charts, 10.1 yards after the catch per reception, fell off to 4.9 this year. And you might think like, okay, that's not great. But they used him completely different. In 2024, his average up the target was 2.4 yards. That skyrocketed to 8.3. And when you watch him play this past year, he's getting like legit downfield looks, sometimes lined up at outside wide receiver in the slot. And so there's an exciting ceiling to chase with Sadiq because what if you watch him play, you look at his physical build, it's like this guy is insane. But then there's also the question that I have, it's like, how does he fit in the NFL? Like, can he be an every down tight end? Can he operate as an 85+% snap guy and also block and get on the field for every down? I don't know that because he didn't really do that at Oregon. So that's just one thing I have kind of circled as a question mark throughout the process on Sadiq, is to see if we can learn some of that stuff. But like I said, this is one of those guys, when you watch the combine, you're going to want to watch Kenyon Sadiq.
Dude, his tape is really, really fun. His best moments, I would say, are some of the things that like have stayed with me of all the players I've scouted so far. So, hey, bringing this up, but his tight end against Penn State, the Big Ten championship game, is iconic to me. It's not just like a random touchdown that you see in someone's, like it is like jumping over somebody. I mean, it's just like amazing play. The USC game, if you really want to see a complete game, that's like one of those games where in almost every facet of the game, as a blocker, 2 touchdowns, like that is the game that's just like, oh, this dude is one of the best players in college football. And also, man, so many leaping catches, where he's like full extending. And so it's pretty awesome. But I brought this up when we were talking last year about Harold Fannin Jr., who had the production profile, was moved all over the field. It needed a very specific landing spot for Fannin to be effective right away. And it happened to be the Browns, which we were like, oh man, he'll be behind David Njoku. Nope. Right away, this dude was the top target earner on his team. Sadiq has to land in that type of spot, or else what you end up doing is chasing somebody who is a traits player who is drafted in the first round and never ends up being the, second best target on his team. And the player that I thought of is Noah Fant, who, I don't know if you remember, he tested through the roof, was like maybe one of the best tight end prospects from a athletic standpoint. And yet when you look at his career, you're like, okay, Seattle, the Broncos, the Bengals, he was never really somebody like that earned targets at an elite level that mattered for fantasy. And so I worry about that Sadiq. When I look at all the other first round tight ends, he's kind of far behind the rest of them.
For sure. And for context on this year's class, like just looking at career yards per round, which is not perfect because in today's world, rosters are changing left and right, quarterbacks come in and out and all that sort of stuff. But if we're just looking at raw yards per run for career in this class, Eli Stowers, 2.34, Michael Trigg, 1.87, Justin Joly, 1.78, Max Klare, 1.74, then Kenyon Sadiq, 1.72. That's what I was saying. Like, it's fine, but his production and efficiency does not match the hype of like, this is your class, you're the first round guy. So incomplete profile, I'd say, but definitely you can see it. You can see the ceiling for sure.
Okay, so as of right now, we know we're pretty sure he's going to be a first-round pick. I don't see him sliding outside of that. We consider him to be the only tight end that's really in the top 40 that could be drafted. And because of that, in a rookie draft, does that land him like 108-ish?
So it's going to be obviously Love, the big 3 wide receivers. I could see,
there's at least 5 wide receivers I would want ahead of Sadiq.
I was going to say, I could see, like, pick your guy. I know we both love KC Concepcion. There's a couple other players in this class that I think could sneak in there. I think he will settle probably into the 106 to 109 range.
Okay. And I think if you want the slow burn, that's okay. I am not expecting year one elite production the way that we've seen from Laporta or any of these guys recently. But really fun player. And I told Betz this earlier. I said, for my NFL team, I would love to have Kenyon Sadiq on my team. I think he's really good in all facets of the game. He did everything asked of him in college, special teams, everything. He's a really, really fun player. And yet for fantasy, I think there's going to be a little bit of discrepancy there. And that's what we have to realize with the game we play is we're analyzing all these things. This is good for the NFL, and yet it could be just fine for fantasy. I'm not projecting the same elite ceiling of some of these other guys. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, next guy we're going to talk about is Max Klare, tight end out of Ohio State. He's a junior, 6'5", 243. He was a 3-star recruit out of Cincinnati, right there at St. Xavier High School. I did watch some baseball highlights of him for about 10 minutes. I need to confess that.
And what do we got?
Dude, when you put up a 477 on-base percentage as a senior, you get some looks, man. He had a smooth lefty stroke. Not quite the power that you would think from somebody his size, but smooth player. Started off at Purdue. All right, so going back to football. His little brother is currently a freshman tight end at Purdue, and he's listed as 6'6". I'm going to put that in air quotes. But what's interesting about Klare is his first 2 seasons at Purdue, he's really good. His second season was awesome. And then transferred to Ohio State as the number 1 tight end in the transfer portal. So he left his brother to go kind of back home, play at Ohio State. And my biggest issue with watching his film is there's the Ohio State stuff where he's kind of just a guy. And then there's the stuff the year before at Purdue that's awesome. His sophomore year stuff at Purdue, I really enjoyed the film. So where do we find the balance of what he's going to be in the NFL if he's not the number 1 target? Because he basically was the number 1 guy for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, if you just watch Ohio State this past year and Max Klare, it's really uninspiring because they had some guys named Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate running the show. And when those are the top 2 weapons on your offense, it would be horrible play design to not feature those guys. So of course he didn't really do that much this past year. We were joking before the show. I was he kind of turned into Dalton Schultz on Ohio State, which is just he's running around out there. He'll get a couple targets every now and then. He'll catch a couple touchdowns, but he's not the offense. And if you only watch that, you'd be like, man, Max Klare is the most boring prospect in the world. But please go watch him at Purdue, especially 2 years ago in 2024. Now, caveat, the Purdue team that year was absolutely horrendous. They were 1-9 or something at one point in the season. But he was the offense and he was wildly efficient and really good after the catch. One of those guys that I don't think is a physical imposing specimen, but when you watch him play, he understands, I think, leverage at tight end and how to kind of win on his routes. And then when he's in the open field, I think he's got some pretty good juice. So I don't know where the truth is on him between the Ohio State version and this guy's dominating the offense at Purdue version. It's probably somewhere in the middle. What does that mean for fantasy? I'm not sure. But when you look at his production profile from 2024, and that's what we're using for his best season, I mean, it's green across the board. So if you're just looking at hey, who produced in college a true fantasy tight end and who's going to get pretty decent draft capital, Max Klare is one of those guys that will fall into that bucket. So no, you shouldn't prioritize him or overdraft him in your rookie draft, but I think there's a fun group of tight ends that could go in the 2nd to early 3rd of your rookie draft. And I wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys hit long term. He's in that bucket for me. So I definitely have interest in Max Klare again, more because of what he did at Purdue, not necessarily this last year at Ohio State.
So he's similar in size to what Colson Loveland is in terms of just you're tall. You're tall for a prospect. And I think he can move better than I would expect for someone his size. Now, he's not a burner. He's not running away from people by any means, but there are plays where he just gets to move. He's lined up most of the time flexed out or as the second inline tight end. So he's not going to be a primary blocker. And the player that I comp-wise as you're a day 2 pick, that you have some yak ability, you have the size, and you're not going to be the primary blocker that I gave is he could be 90% of what Mark Andrews was, who was the second tight end drafted by the Ravens that year. And you can attack teams down the seam. You can work inside the red zone. He's not as bulky as Andrews are, but same height. And I think that it can work. I just don't know what fit he's going to be. And right away, he's not going to be the number one tight end. Like, he's not going to start for a team day one. He's going to take some time to develop. He's still really young, but he's intriguing to me, especially if he lands in the right situation. Like, if he lands with the Chiefs, I'm interested.
Of course you are. Yeah, he's really interesting because, like I said at the top, kind of at the overall look at this class, it's a deep group of tight ends. So pick your flavor. Like, which guy do you like from this kind of secondary group is a fun way to attack this position this year in Dynasty rookie drafts. But I wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys that we're going to talk about from Klare on aren't like in your starting lineup in fantasy this year. But this is why we play with taxi squads and why we like formats where you have a deep bench and you can hold a guy for a year or two. I do think Klare has a chance to develop in a couple years to like be somebody that we care about in fantasy. Again, wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't work out because that's how it goes at tight end fantasy. But I do think the tools are there and the scheme fit will depend on that. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised because sometimes I only watch the most recent season. But with Klare, I was like, why is he being mocked in the third round of all these NFL drafts? Like, I'm missing something. And then I went back to Purdue tape and I was like, okay, now I understand. So if you haven't watched it yet, listeners, it's a really, really fun watch. Go check it out.
All right, next name is Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt, listed as a grad student, which, you know, Betz and I, we don't hold that against people. As people that finish grad school, we're cool with that, man. Andy, Mike, and Jason would never.
Dude, those guys. I mean, it's just sad.
Eli Stowers is an interesting player in terms of his path. He's from Denton, Texas, which is home of North Texas, the Mean Green. I mean, what a fun team there. But he came in as a quarterback, and if you go back and you look at recruiting different sites, he was listed as the 12th quarterback, a 4-star recruit in that class, just ahead of names like Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe.
That's hilarious.
I've shared this before. I loved high school recruiting stuff. Back in the day, I used to just go through these lists all the time. It's really, really fun. If you go back a couple years and you just look at some of these lists, you're like, man, it is all over the map of where, like, you know, Fernando Mendoza or any of these guys are listed coming out of high school, and it shows you how players can develop. Stowers went from a quarterback at Vanderbilt. He was originally recruited at Texas A&M, then New Mexico State, then followed Diego Pavia to Vanderbilt, and put on a ton of muscle. In college or in high school, he was listed at 215. Now he's listed at 235. So of this class, he has the production profile of somebody who commanded targets in an offense, which is really, really cool. Like, we can translate that to PPR production at the next level. I just don't know what part he's going to have in an NFL offense because he's not an every down tight end.
Yeah, I put in my notes here like tight end in name only because he really is like a big slot wide receiver. And if you love to play this game from the analytical side and not really watch... Imagine. Get your hand in the dirt, watch the tape. If you're like Kyle and you like to only look at this game in spreadsheets, this is your guy. The yards per route run is off the charts. He was targeted on 27% of his routes over the last few years at Vandy. Like, he was the air quotes wide receiver one. He was the dude. But when you watch and then you kind of put context around it, you're like, okay, I can see how this could work for fantasy. Like the Evan Ingram-esque style of player where it's like, you know, he's not really probably going to be a full-time player initially. I know a lot of like NFL scouts have kind of mentioned like he needs to learn how to block. And when you talk about like he was recruited as a high school quarterback coming out, that makes a lot of sense. Like when you watch him, it does kind of seem like he's still learning to be a tight end, but the receiving ability is definitely there. He is athletic, and I do think he's another guy that's going to test pretty well at the combine. So there's enough data points to say this might work. And if a team, you know, values him enough to draft him in like, let's say the third round or something, okay, leave the light on. He's a guy that's really fun to stash and see what happens. But he does enter this mold of like, how does he fit in the NFL is the question. Can he be an every down player? And I think right now, when looking at his film and his production, everything in totality, I think the answer to that question is probably no, which means, again, like Max Klare, and even to some degree like Sadiq, it might take a little time here for Eli Stowers. But the film is fun. The receiving metrics are awesome. So for sure, I am leaving the light on that this could work.
Yeah, a couple of notes I have. He sets up his defenders pretty well, especially on in-breaking routes. And then I said when his hips are on, he gets separation. So, you know how it is, man. When those
You were studying his hip swivel.
Dude, it matters, man.
What was his pad level like?
I don't know, but sometimes when he got pressed at the line, he got crushed. Like, he got knocked off his route. And that just comes from somebody who's hasn't played tight end his entire life. So I think he could be somebody who contributes right away on third downs. And that works for an NFL team. Like, you just think about what the Rams did this past year, where it was like, Colby Parkinson was their red zone dominator. Davis Allen was kind of a jack of all trades guy. Tyler Higbee is like ancient and still doing his thing. And then there's Terrence Ferguson, who was downfield or nothing type of dude. Everybody had a role of what they could do. And I think he could fit that specific role on a team as a second or third tight end. So I'm interested if he gets day 2 draft capital in a full PPR league. I could see the route where he ends up becoming, a top 10 tight end eventually, which what does that even mean nowadays?
For sure. I think remember that like one season with the Dolphins where Mike Gesicki was like a PPR monster for fantasy? I could see a season in the first like 3 or 4 years of his career where it's like, okay, we got one of those years, great. And then all of a sudden, like, he doesn't fit with his team, that sort of thing. So we'll see. But like I said, the film is fun and the production as far as efficiency is definitely there. So it's one of those guys that you want to pay attention to. But like Kyle was saying, it's fun to talk about these guys, but also it's kind of a sad reality, right? Because like in fantasy, we're starting the top 12 tight ends in the entire league. And right now, because there's so many good young ones, we already know like the top 7 or 8. So it's like you have to be awesome to break into this mold that we even care about in fantasy, which is really tough unless you play in a, double tight end league, which if you do, I feel sorry for you.
Oh yeah. Well, mine is mostly tight ends only. Obviously kickers. I'm not an idiot.
Oh, and best position in football.
Yeah, and contested catches only. Those leagues are really fun. All right, I have 2 more players that I have to bring up in this tight end class. The next one is Michael Trigg out of Baylor, aka Trigg Daddy. Trigg Daddy. This is Mike's favorite player in the class. Now, he's not going to have him ranked number 1. He has him ranked 2 among tight ends.
So soft.
The story is all over the map. I got to just throw this out there from Trigg. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Tampa, Florida, started at USC. Then he transfers from USC to Ole Miss with Jackson Dart. So they're buds, if that means anything to you. Then he's suspended a couple of times at Ole Miss and Baylor and missed some games in 2021, missed some games in 2022. So you got some injury stuff. And then the story behind the scenes is that he was kicked off Ole Miss's team for disciplinary reasons, missing practices. And then the tight end that they brought in the transfer portal was hurt the first couple of games of the season. Trigg played those games. When he came in, Trigg didn't play a snap against Bama, and Trigg was like, peace, I'm out, and they kind of had a falling out. He ends up at Baylor and has some really, really fun tape. So it is all over the map, but the word we have to associate, and Mike would be very mad if we didn't bring it up, is of all the players in this class, this dude has the dog.
Oh my goodness, man. Yeah, ignore all the red flags off the field. Everything on the field is super fun. And I do think like he probably will be off multiple teams' boards just period because of some of the background stuff. But if we're just talking about if he gets on the field and he gets his head together.
He's off your board, right? Because you hold a strict standard for your fantasy team.
Of course not, dude. I want all the bad boys. Give me Trigg. If you're just talking about on the field at Baylor those last couple of years, one of the first plays I saw when I turned on the film was, I forget the game against who it was, but he was in the open field against a cornerback and just shoulder down, this cornerback folds in half and just falls backwards. And I immediately messaged Mike after I saw his rookie rankings and I said, I assume you saw this play. And he goes, dog. That's all he said. So I knew immediately when I saw the play why Mike loved him. And this dude, to his credit, broke a ton of tackles over the last couple of years. 24 missed tackles forced per PFF, and was second this year among all tight ends. So when you're thinking about, we joke about it with like Mason Taylor types last year and stuff like that. Like he legit does break tackles and has insane efficiency because kind of like the other guys in this class, he's not really a tight end. Like he's a wide receiver who is just a man amongst boys out there and dominating at Baylor. So his highlights are so fun because it's a lot of one-handed catches, contested catches, diving catches, running over, cornerbacks that are giving him 50 pounds. But all that to say is like, I don't know I don't know where he's at mentally as far as the off the field type stuff. I also don't know how he fits today's game from being an every down tight end. So it's kind of like we keep saying with this class. There's not this like traditional, you're going to play 80% of the snaps at tight end guy. So it's a thin needle to thread for fantasy. But my goodness, if he does get a chance and he can produce like he did at Baylor, it's going to be super fun for fantasy.
Yeah, his two buzzwords that you're going to hear, which, if you want to create a little game, a bingo card of all the things you're going to hear, we've talked about those. His is going to be off the field stuff and basketball background. Those are going to be the two that like everyone's there. I did find a really fun article when he was recruited at USC. That was back in the day when Drake London was there, which is crazy to see that they were on the same field at USC. Trigg and Drake London, who's played 4 years in the NFL. That like this could be like a front court of a basketball team is what they were trying to talk about with those two. But I feel like he makes the plays down the field as like a seam tight end that are really fun. He's twitchy, which for a tight end is not normal. It is a spread offense at Baylor. So if you're wondering why Sire Robertson, their quarterback of Baylor, is not getting as much hype, there's just issues when you look at teams from college to the pros and can their offense translate. And I wonder about the same thing with Trigg. He is the wild card of this class. Like the landing spot needs to be there. The coaching staff needs to be there. There's all those things. I found this quote from Sports Info Solutions that says, there are concerns about his on-field demeanor as he tries hard when he is the primary target, but lacks the same effort when he is not expecting the ball. He gets visibly frustrated when not targeted or when teammates make mistakes and has very poor body language.
Good locker room guy. That's the guy. That's the guy you want,
dude. But he's a dog, and so there are very few players that have this type of career arc, scouting profile. I saw Gerald Everett thrown out, who was a second-round pick by Sean McVay back in the day. Like when you get the ball, you can be an athletic freak, but we'll see where he ends up. Wild card of this draft. I do have one more name I want to bring up because he's an interesting name. It's Justin Joly, tight end out of NC State. Is he really 6'3"?
I mean, they can't put anything on the internet that's not true, Kyle, as you've learned over the years.
He's listed as 6'3", 263. That is quite generous.
It didn't look like that to me. Watching him play, he looked a little undersized, but that's what it says on the internet, and you can't put anything on the internet if it's not true. So,
interesting story, but 2-star recruit and played wide receiver in high school. So really, the tight end portion of his game is also part that you're like, is he really a tight end? You kind of brought that up. All these prospects, like, are you really a true tight end? I saw some high school conversations where he talked about like, I basically wanted to be Devontae Adams. That's mostly how I thought about what I did. And this past year, most of his stuff at NC State was all underneath stuff. Like if you look at his ADOT, all of his stuff is just short underneath stuff where he sits in zone and he had some really good sideline catches. But he's not really explosive. I don't see him as an every down tight end. I would say he takes a while to get up to speed. Like it's just not fast. So in this class, is he the tight end 5? Sure. I just don't think he's much more than just like an ancillary option in a passing game.
I think for how it works in the NFL, that's probably the most likely outcome. That said, when he does get opportunities, I mean, this guy is producing like legit numbers, and like his catch rate and hands are awesome. So that's where the wide receiver background definitely shows up. Like he's a natural hands catcher. He can make contested catches. But like you said, his role changed quite a bit this past year. His ADOT was down, more just like underneath type stuff. And he wasn't this like physical tackle breaking machine underneath where like you think about, and this is not fair to compare anybody to, but like you think about like Trey McBride, it's like, yeah, some of his stuff's underneath, but you know when he gets that ball, he's not going down. He's going to pick up 5 or 6 yards after the catch. That's not what was happening with these targets. Like it was a lot underneath stuff and then not a ton of after the catch ability at that. I will say he was really good in the red zone. Like a bunch of his touchdown catches came inside the 25-yard line. So he was a weapon down there, and obviously that's something that we want to see in college. So I do think the physical tools are there as far as his ability to produce, and his wide receiver background shows up. But like you said, a little undersized. How does he fit? That's kind of the same recurring theme with this class is how does he fit in the NFL? And that's why this is so hard to translate from your final year in college to year one in the pros. It's not the norm, even though recently we have had that. It's not the norm over the last handful of years, decade. But I think he has a role in the NFL. I just don't know what that means for fantasy.
Yeah, I wrote for his NFL scheme fit that he's a committee tight end who might be used best as a check down receiver, as a zone buster, and the highest end comp I could give, and I think this is being super probably too nice, is Isaiah Likely, who was a 4th round pick. And in dynasty circles, I feel like Isaiah Likely is like a big name that people think like, this is awesome. You just compare this guy to Isaiah Likely, but Likely's kind of had a very specific role, hasn't really broken out. And as of this recording, we don't know where he is in terms of free agency. So probably round 4, round 5 pick. Just a name you need to know, Justin Joly, because you and your mama are going to call him Justin Joly.
Don't do that. If you do that, everyone knows you don't know ball. So you got to call him by the right name.
Yeah, Joly. A couple other tight ends I just need to mention. Oscar Delp out of Georgia. I kind of like Jack Indries out of Texas. He was there with Mendoza at California. Has some fun plays. Eli Raridon of Notre Dame is huge. If you're looking for a prospect that is just like 6'5", 6'6", he's interesting. Any final thoughts on this year's class? I mean, there's other names that are in the production profiles.
Yeah, no, I think the general take home is that it's not the class that we saw last year by any means. There's one guy that's being billed as the dude in this class, which is obviously Kenyon Sadiq. But in general, there's no like, this guy's going to come into the league and play 85% of the snaps and be an every down tight end. It's a group of really good pass catchers that have really good efficiency metrics that will have a role in the NFL. I feel very good about that, but might be inconsistent or just take time to get there. So really fun tight end class. I was actually more excited about it after watching all these guys than I was going into the process. That, like I said, you'll use a 3rd round rookie pick on, maybe a 4th round rookie pick on, stash them for a couple years and see what happens.
Yeah, my prediction is that you're going to see a run on tight ends in rounds 4 and 5 this year. Just the way the NFL's trended. There's a lot of guys in that range that I think teams are going to look at and be like, this year's class is good, but I don't need to spend the draft capital on day 2 for these guys. And so usually for fantasy, when we see somebody that ends up round 4 and round 5, I mean, there's the George Kittles of the world that you can point to, but he's an outlier. Good for the NFL, not great for fantasy. Is that like what we should name our show? Good for the NFL. These prospects are not great for fantasy.
I mean, one of them could pop up. Let's be optimistic, Kyle. Come on. One of these guys could pop up.
Okay, well then just say it. Who do you think, other than Sadiq, has the highest ceiling?
Highest ceiling, Michael Trigg. Lowest floor, Michael Trigg.
Dude, that's the way to go, though. That's the way that Mike likes playing anyways. So it totally makes sense.
Only one person wins your league every year. I mean, come on.
Yep. That's going to do it for this episode. Next week, we will be back talking wide receivers. Make sure you go to ultimatedraftkit.com, check out all those prospect profiles, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.